Hello, this is Barbara Field, and welcome to the Journey of Grief, Becoming Us Without Them. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in Sacramento, California, and I started this channel so that people who are grieving the loss of people or animals or life have a place to be together and share their experience. And so today, I've invited some very brave people to help me have a hard conversation. Grief is awful to begin with, but it can be much more complicated when the loss that you're grieving was with someone who was very hard to be with. If you spend a lifetime trying to love and be loved by your parent and it never goes very well, or your grandparent, and then they die with all of those little strings dangling, it's very complicated. And so we're going to talk about that today. And so let's start with Donna. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us which parent or parents we're going to be talking about today?
I'll be talking about my dad. My mom, she's 93 and still around, and it goes through the same thing I do, looking back and going, if I had only. So he died, I'd say about 12 years ago, and I was very relieved, and I never shed a tear. And if anything, I feel a little guilty about that. Do have fond memories of things that he did right, usually when it was just him and me alone and away from home, and maybe going skiing or something. But he was mean and abusive to both me and my brother. My brother is pretty much a hot mess. No, the whole family was affected by him. And my mom and I talk a lot about it. I'm not sure what else or what more.
That's a great start.
Yeah.
Okay, Amity, how about you?
So my grandparents got divorced when I was 11, and I was very, very close with them. You could say they were my other parents. They were only 36 and 38 when I was born, so I spent a lot of time with them. My grandparents got divorced when I was 11, and I was, still very close with my both grandparents, and actually was living with my grandfather when he was introduced to this woman, and he married her within 3 weeks and completely alienated our whole family and all of his friends. She did that and he allowed it. And therefore it's all his responsibility. They chose to move away, which in hindsight was probably a good thing. They moved to Minnesota. He had to take care of her for the last 15 years of her life because she had cancer. I feel that was a good penance for him. When she died, he moved back to California to be here with his family, who he had just shit on the previous 28 years. So it was very difficult. I probably didn't speak to him for about 3 years after he got here. Any family gathering that he was at, I would not be at, or I would make a scene and leave. I was devastated by the loss of our relationship. Caused me to not trust men or relationships. And so we mended our relationship because he really tried. He apologized and he tried. And I'm thankful for that. But one of my uncles did not get that. And so I don't speak to him anymore because of the difficulties between us, and my anger for my uncle for not participating in our family, for not helping while my grandfather was dying or being around. But also I just couldn't. I know they had their own dynamics that are separate from mine. But really, he died last year, and I was happy for him to not be in pain, or because he had dementia. He wasn't really in pain, but his mind was. So it was okay for him to go. But I have a lot of anger. I don't know if it's directly towards him or the situation or being left for so many years by a man who I thought was my whole world. I mean, I was so close with him. So I still have a lot of anger about that. And that's what I have to deal with on a daily basis.
That's hard. Okay, Melinda, how about if you introduce yourself and tell us who you're grieving?
My name is Melinda, and I just recently lost my dad about 3 months ago. And so the grieving process is a little different for me. I've been estranged from him in my relationship since the time I was born. And so I'm recognizing now that there was a lot of grieving through that process. But about 3 years ago, he flatlined in the hospital, and I got the phone call that, they didn't think he was going to make it. And so miraculously, he did recover, and it gave me 3 more years with him. But it's been an interesting 3 years, and I'm really finding that it's my faith and my relationship with God that has really given me different perspective. So I was able to be around him and interact with him. He lives about 350 miles away, or lived about 350 miles away. So it was still a lot of traveling back and forth. But my mindset changed after he flatlined, and spent a lot of time praying about that and asking God to show me just different realizations of things, just recognizing that I wasn't able to change him, but I feel like it was a gift to be able to have 3 more years to change my mindset of how to interact with him. And so it's interesting though, I'm finding there are moments when grief does pop up, but in general, when I think of him at this point, I still I only think of positive memories, which is really interesting because the last 3 years have been very in my face of just the stark difference of how he treats me versus my other two siblings, and definitely favors the other two and coddles them more, and very dismissive of me. And it's not just
Oop, I think we lost her again. Okay, so let's go to the first topic. So, Amity, you wanted us to talk about that trying to forgive yourself for being so angry. So that it's not as much forgiving them. Forgiving them is good for us as well, but it's all that guilt we feel when we are angry at a dead person. And so it's not as much angry that they died. Sometimes we're angry that someone died because of the way they died, or they didn't take care of themselves, or they did something careless. But when you have a lifetime of hurt and disappointment and anger, just because they die, that doesn't go away. And so talk about that. What kind of goes through your mind as
It doesn't, even even as we reconciled our relationship, kind of, I was, able to be around him and not scream at him every time I saw him. I still have this anger, this deep anger for what he did to our family. My I'm so close in age with my mom and my uncles. I feel like they're my siblings in a way. And not talking to one of my uncles is devastating. And my mom not having the same relationship with her brothers because of what we had to go through with my grandfather, and all four of us having a different relationship with him a little bit. So we each have our own struggles. And I still have a lot of anger about how he left our family. Even though, yeah, looking back, I can see that it's our issues to fix, right? With our own non-judgment of each other for how we have felt throughout this whole ordeal with him, and how we treat each other now, or have treated each other over these last 3 years. And now it's been, over the last year, almost year and a half since he's been gone, and how difficult it is with my uncles, and how our family is fractured because of it. And I would like to say that it's, typically just about the money, you know, hurry up, sell the property, how much money can we get out of everything? But it's really the loss of family. I don't want to spend time with my uncles, and therefore I don't see their families. And our family is very close, very, very close. And like we've talked about before, Barbara, like it's not just the holidays that I'm missing out on. It's the weekly, or at least monthly birthday dinners with my cousins and everybody. And there are children now that we are all missing out on and not getting to experience together. And so I feel a whole loss of family because of that also.
Yeah, it kind of spreads through the generations.
And so I'm mad. I'm mad at him, and I'm very sad, but I'm still mad at him for this, because he created it, I feel like. But I mean, I know that was his shit. He had to do his own thing, right?
Right.
Doesn't mean I'm not mad.
Right. So eventually we do enough healing that we're neutral. Like, okay, I can stop feeling as if he destroyed my life. But that still doesn't take away the sadness of noticing the effects of the generational trauma. Like my dad was just grumpy and critical and judgmental and not particularly fond of women. And all of us, I always tell people, my brothers and sister and I have done enough therapy to pay for a small yacht. And so we were mostly estranged from each other. And when we get together, we just kind of remind each other. So we come together for a crisis. Like when my mom was dying, we pulled it together for that. When my brother was dying, we pulled it together for that. But the rest of the time, we barely hang out because it's so complicated to be around people who have that same history, and all of us are a little quirky. So how about you, Donna? Let's talk about that, how complicated it is to have those negative feelings.
Well, to be very honest, it's not complicated at all. I think he had it coming, really. And I often think that his death without my being there, which I just happened to have bronchitis at the time he was actually passing, and I was very relieved I didn't have to go down. I know it's terrible, but I feel a little guilty about that, of course. But on the other hand, he brought it on himself. He was mean to my mother. He was really mean to my brother, who was a very sensitive soul. And we carry into our lives now the collateral damage of what he did. He was verbally abusive to her, physically to us. My brother, like I said, is a mess. So this dynamic in the family, it's taken my mother many, many years to finally understand that her son is basically a narcissist, totally self-centered, because I wanted to ask Melinda if the favoring was for boys, if there were two other siblings were boys, because I know my dad favored my brother and spoiled him to a point where he truly is spoiled. And he's put a lot of grief on the family, the brother, carrying forward this kind of legacy of meanness. And now, I've had children, and now I have a grandchild, and that brother is affecting their lives as well. So it's just this, vein of discontent that even though he's dead, it's still alive. And we all work on it. And my mother is working on it with me. We're very, very close, and I see her all the time, and we work on this. We talk about it often because it manifests in my brother as a human, living being. So that it's, we still kind of, in a way, he's still alive. So.
Absolutely, because that trauma still lives in our bodies. It's not like we just, oh, good, he's dead, healed. You have years of like either terrible or non-parenting, non-involvement, non-connection, and then the peripheral damage of all the wounded people that we're now trying to call a family.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Melinda, we were just talking about how complicated it can be because people more typically talk about different kinds of grief. And so to be someone who, what's really true is that it wasn't a huggy-feely relationship, and we don't have that loss of connection to them because we never had a connection in the first place. And what we're left with is a big bag of poop that we have to try to get out of our bodies with therapy or friends or something so that we don't carry that forward in our lives.
Yeah, it's hard to discern. There are times that, because it's still so fresh, there are times that I wonder if I'm dissociated or if I really have worked through different parts of grief and just accepted things already. So it'll be interesting to see how that unpacks over time. But even over the last couple of months, just, I mean, he passed. He had a will, but he didn't have a trust. And so I'm helping the executor come alongside, and even those things are painful, of just the many ways that I tried to help the last many years. And it was just evident, not just to me, but I had other family members, extended family members, say, just comment about how I was the responsible one and I was doing all these other things and I was the trustworthy one. And for whatever reason, he couldn't see it. And so, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm just really dissociated from it or if I really just recognized we just never had that relationship and I never expected that from him. And so he can say what he wants, but that doesn't really impact the value of who I really am.
Right. And yet, like you said, you're having to clean up behind him now because he didn't want to do the grown-up hard stuff. I'm just going to die and you guys figure that out.
Yeah.
And that, so yeah, he's been dead such a short time, you're still kind of in the numbness. But as you notice how it has influenced your relationships and influenced your children, their children, it's hard to have charitable thoughts to someone who set up a family system that just left dead bodies in the wake.
Well, and it's very interesting even to have conversations with my kids and just to hear what their perspectives are of him. And he could be very, very charming to a lot of other people. But it was interesting to hear all four of my kids make comments about how prickly he was or how difficult he was. Even I have a new daughter-in-law and she met him once before he passed. And she picked up very quickly how just how controlling and demanding he could be. And so, and part of it is, I mean, he was 86. And so part of it is, okay, the loss of hearing, the loss of sight, the fear of dying, all those things, and just old age. But there was another part of just not being nice. Just not being nice. So, yeah.
And and so Donna, you wanted us to talk about that peripheral damage, how it goes into the generations. And so all of the neurology relationship people are talking about attachment. And if we have those secure attachment where we know that we are absolutely loved and enjoyed, and all of our parts are enjoyed, and we have these wonderful parents who are these lovely resources to help us process our emotions and work through our struggles. And then we become grown-ups who know how to do that and teach that to our children. And that's not really what we got, right? And so it definitely affected like who I dated through high school. And even though by some miracle I married a really nice person, I couldn't really let myself attach to him because I just didn't trust men very much. So I had to do a lot of therapy to just like a guy that was likable. And I see that influence. My children work hard at their relationships, and it would have been nice to be those people that got that in the crib and didn't have to get it in a therapy office. And so let's talk about that, Donna, just noticing how that still lives in your body.
Absolutely does. And sometimes I think detachment is and it is strong detachment ability I have. I think I finally noticed that. And I wasn't in high school. I was much older when my dad died. So I was a grown up, and I was probably in the process of getting a divorce. I was probably around 40. So all of that made me, yes. And like the rest of you, I had trouble relating to men, and they were all dangerous to me. It was just year after year with my dad of the beatings, and it was just bad, really bad. So it was easier for me to be alone. And by alone, I mean just with friends and family, not alone, but with a single person. So I was single for 15 years, and I met my current husband when I was 60. So that was quite a leap and a breaking of that detachment. But with him, it was easy. So that's why, I guess we marry people because they're easy. But yes, and my mother has the same thing. He treated her the same way. And she has a very strong ability to detach herself from emotional output. And I wonder if it's genetic or if it's dad's fault. So, because, we were both older when he died. So
Yeah, that's great. That is
it's
great.
just so easy to just not get involved with emotional garbage. It's just easy for me to detach from that in most cases.
Yep. Yep. It's like detachment is an indoor sport. I can help out in this. It can be really good in a serious crisis because I'm not actually in the room at all. My body is here going through the first aid training, but I'm somewhere down the block.
Yeah. Yeah. No, not with my family, and people that are close, but I have a very select group of people whom I trust entirely. And other than that, it's pending. So
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. So, Melinda, let's talk about that, noticing how living with a detached, complicated, or absent dad has influenced relationships then and now.
It definitely impacted my marriage. I didn't realize how accustomed I was just to being there as something that could be on the shelf and taken off the shelf at their discretion. I didn't recognize that. It wasn't until the last couple of years that I really started to see that part's pretty hard. And I have 4 kids that are grown or just about to be grown. They're in the oldest one is 21, and then the youngest one is 17. And so just seeing how that's impacting their relationships, I'm encouraged by one of my sons that's now married, and I see how intentional he is with his wife. But I have another son that just got engaged, and I'm concerned. I'm concerned because I still see those kind of patterns happening with that one. And so it's also interesting to see how it impacts dynamics of family. So my biological father is the one that recently passed away, but I had a stepdad that passed away about 7 years ago. And the interesting part is my stepdad was an overt narcissist. And I actually had a closer relationship with him than I did with my biological father, which is really doesn't make logical sense. But even recently, I actually received some communication from a sister of mine just today and just seeing the impact, even though I had a better relationship with my stepdad than I did my biological father, I could see the impact of the relationship between my half sister and my stepdad having a really negative impact on her. And I can also see, even though my biological father was closer with my older two sisters, because they were like 7 and 9 when my parents divorced, and I was 2, um, I can still see the impact of my father on both of my sisters in a very different way. So it may sound crazy, and I don't know, Barbara, you would have a better understanding of this, but in some ways, it almost seems as though the dissociation and the separation from my biological father is actually, in some ways, been more of a protection, because they are really struggling with, my 2 older sisters are really struggling with his death way more than I am.
Well, they were closer to him, and so they miss him. They had some with, so now there's some without, and you were just mostly without. So your body isn't having to rewrite the map of a world without him in it, because it already lived in a world without him in it. And so, Amity, your relationships along the way and now as a result of your grandfather's influence on the whole family system.
Oh, complete disassociation. I do not trust men. It's been very difficult to have a relationship as an adult. And the good ones I push away. The genuine, kind men I tend to push away, and I gravitate towards the ones who are unavailable. Because I guess because he wasn't available, he wasn't there for me. But I can cut people off in a heartbeat. Family, friends, all of it. If we, right now especially, and I know it's my own for my own protection, but it's not healthy, but it's the way that I protect myself. I don't want any kind of confrontation in my life right now. And I don't know that that's healthy. It's
Yeah.
much easier to disassociate.
Yeah, the good news is that can be repaired with good therapy. The kind of therapy I practice is really good for that. And my husband and I were married 44 years before he died. And at the beginning, it was just me, just like, oh, do you have to be so nice? What do you want? And doing a lot of therapy. So I can truthfully say that by the time he died, the last 15 years at least had been actually good. We actually were attached, which then made the grieving much worse because I actually cared that he was gone. But it really does speak to all of the hard therapy I did. But neurologically, what we know is that part of your brain that needs to have installed a belief that people are a source of comfort and joy, if that isn't working really well by around 12 or 13, it gets pruned when your brain is saying, okay, I got to make room for new stuff. Let's get rid of the stuff we're not using. That noticing loneliness part, noticing longing part, that doesn't stick around. So for us, very often we will have urges, but I translate that to loneliness. So if I'm like wanting to go shopping for things I don't need, or I have a lot of addictive impulses, if I want to go eat chocolate, if I want to go shopping, if I want to control things or join things, like, oh, I must be lonely. So when was the last time I hung out with one of my friends? Oh yeah. So if I go do something relational, not because my brain says I'm lonely, call your friend, call your sister, hang out with your cool neighbor. Nope. My brain says, is there chocolate here? And then that's a bell. I have to say, oh, that's lonely. So it's not that a lot of our brain, the relational part of our brain, remains fetal for our entire life. So that can be, a lot of that can be repaired. So now when I'm with people, I actually enjoy people a lot. I can feel that richness and I can feel that connection. But the part that says go get people, that's not all that seem to be repairing. So just know that's not because we're bad people. That's a wiring problem. But there are really great therapies that can get a lot of that trauma out of our bodies and just make it easy. So I mostly stay in the rooms that I'm in. And not that I'm not apparently still really good at dissociating, because I can do it as an indoor sport, but I mostly don't need to. I don't feel in danger all the time, and I don't wait for every man to be my dad or every woman to be my mom. So so what has like worked so far? Melinda is talking about how, like, having faith in God. So if people can believe that God is a substitute for the dad parts, then they can put their needs in God, or finding yourself in a community of lovely people that are actually safe and predictable and reliable and consistently there. A great therapist, a great recovery group, a quilting group, just any place where your brain gets to see people actually do the thing. So what have been some restorative things, not necessarily for the relationship, because my dad was just so crabby. He didn't even get it if you tried to have hard conversations with him. Like, I don't think I can do this. Well, so it wasn't something you thought of doing, but I have had a lot of restorative experiences since then. So let's talk about that. So what has been restorative for your heart? Like, Donna, you talked about your new marriage. Let's go there first. So how are you able to find somebody that you could experience as yummy and worth the trouble to invest?
That's a good question. No, my husband is a very intelligent person, and he sees it from the outside and is very open about saying what he sees in my family dynamic that reflects the issue that I have with my dead dad. So he's very in tune to it. So as far as that goes, he's able to identify a lot of things, especially being that now my brother is sort of the toxic person in the family dynamic in total, including my kids and grandkid. He's able to point it out we actually came to see you about the narcissistic toxic behavior that he was insinuating into our lives, and we were able to put a stop to it. We learned a lot from that experience. In some ways, I almost think that was a great experience, because now one of the restorative things I do recognize what a narcissist is now, and the detachment comes in handy when you see toxic people around you, and it's goodbye. I can see it and I don't engage. I just don't engage. And I keep my life as empty of that crap as possible. And, I keep my mind, I have lots of projects and things I do. I'm retired now, so I can do anything I want. So, but yes, those two things, a lot of busyness and a very fine husband who helps me recognize these things, because I'm too close to it sometimes. And it's not always great, because sometimes he'll point out little dynamics between mom and me and the kids and me and so forth that may not be perfect, but that's okay. He has a right to do that, and he does a good job. So those two things help.
And he does it as an invitation, not an invocation.
Kind of.
Yeah.
And one other thing that, just mindfulness, because my father was so impactive, and just this mindfulness, and a big deal in our life was my not carrying the abuse forward to my children. And that was a day where it almost happened. And I stopped and I said, that will never happen again. The abuse will never transcend into the kids. So, just you have to be thinking about, preventing yourself from, it's just mindfulness about how you react to certain things and being able to pinpoint that's because of dad. So it's kind of hard to describe.
No, it's perfect. Being able to have the reactions, but say, okay, what's that? Oh, that, of course. And then you sort of talk yourself down out of the tree.
Right.
Like, okay, well, I could do that, but I think I'll do this instead. And that's getting your wise brain back on instead of letting the brain run off and do something.
Most of the time. Yeah. I have a very visceral reaction to sexist men. I have not gotten that under control yet. They really pissed me off. So working on that.
Yeah, well, boundaries. Somebody's got to say it to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Amity, restorative. What have you done that's been restorative?
I wish that I could pinpoint something, but after, spending more time with you, I don't know how I've gotten here, but I have learned to hold back a little bit. I mean, I still explode regularly, probably. But if I can not scream at everyone when it arises, if I could bite my tongue once or twice out of the 10, then that's at least helpful. I'm nowhere near healed or anything like that. I can't say that. But if I take the time to walk, be physical, especially in the mornings, it really helps me set a better tone for the day rather than waking up pissed off and letting that go all day, which is what happens a lot, honestly.
Well, and what's hard about your situation is you live with your mom and your grandmother.
Yes.
So you're still
Yes.
sort of being dipped in the original acid every morning.
Yes.
And the rest of us don't, we're not dipped in it. We occasionally brush up against it, but we don't live in the original crazy making system.
Yes. And I'm still in the middle of it. So that's not healthy. But I know that's also my choice. So I must be learning something in this process. It doesn't always feel great, but it is.
Well, and part of healing is, like Donna said, the mindfulness of like, oh, this is because not it's his fault. All my problems are his fault. All my feelings are his fault. But like, well, of course I'm like this. Where would I have learned anything else? Of course, this is how I react to conflict. Of course, I shut down whenever something looks mean and scary. Where would I have learned anything else? So being gracious with yourself that you are a work in progress, that you're awake now, that you're noticing, and that you're believing that you can change and grow and try new things instead of, yep, I'm stuck like this forever. So being kind to yourself and saying, well, yeah, that's exactly what I was taught. Why would I be any different?
And that's been huge to be able to say that to myself. Sometimes, I haven't mastered it by far, but it's been helpful.
Yeah, and I sometimes will say, what would Christine do? What would Carrie do? I just try to channel my two very chill friends. Like, what would be happening if Christine was handling this situation, not this? And it helps me to, oh yeah, okay, that's right. I know. Somebody in there knows.
Yeah. And it's okay to be crazy still also.
Yeah. And just acknowledging it as, oh, look at my nervous system. Look what my nervous system does, instead of I'm a terrible person. Like, I'm a computer. I'm like a bulb that got planted upside down and too deep.
Yeah.
But I might have grown the wrong direction for a long time, but I'm headed for the son now.
Yeah.
Okay, Melinda, restorative experiences that have helped you to find your way towards the best version of yourself as opposed to a reflection of the system.
Well, I really like that analogy that you just did of the bulb in the ground. That's a really great word picture. Thanks. Um, I guess I kind of have to go back for a moment in that I'm still unpacking a lot of different mess because between my mom, my biological father, and my stepdad, there was a lot of mess there. And I ended up being in a really unhealthy marriage for 28 years, just lots of patterns of destruction in so many different ways. But one of the blessings of the last couple of years is different people, actually, like I said, over the last 3 years, other people speaking up, even when I've been visiting my father, other family members that I did not expect to hear, hey, I really appreciate you, keeping us updated on your dad's health, or hey, you're doing a great job here, or other people affirming things that he wouldn't see or acknowledge. I was doing them because I just believe that that's what I was supposed to be doing to honor him, just regardless of how he was treating me, not to allow myself to be treated horribly, but just, when he would say a snarky comment or dismiss something, just take a breath and give myself the space to walk away and learn how to advocate for myself and say, well, I don't agree with that, or that's not true. Not engage in an argument, but just make statements of facts. And so having other people, without asking, just other people affirming, seeing that they saw that I was still loving and serving him despite his prickliness, that was huge. Other things that are interesting is God did bring different men into my life in different ways, mostly through churches. One was through work, that would just affirm different things. That I was at the last school that I was at, there was a very sweet man, probably in his 70s. I could not walk by a door without him opening it. And it was nothing that I could say. That's just who he was. But it was just different things like that where I feel like God just spoke right to me and said, no, you're worth it. And so I believe that it was a gift, that God placed these different men in my life in different ways to speak truth about what they saw about me or just to set an example. And so I I think I'm still attracting not so great stuff. Um, but the combination of those men and really great godly women who, as I'm unpacking different things, say, well, that's not true, or good friends that are like, well, that makes me angry. I don't understand how all these different things are happening and why your family can't see these different dynamics. And so hearing those affirming words, but also being willing to put myself in places where I'm asking, okay, am I off here? What am I doing differently? And also recognizing that as I'm learning, as I'm growing, and I'm setting boundaries, and I'm willing to no longer live in fear, but willing to engage in the difficult conversations, even if I know it's risking a relationship with my kids or with somebody else, I'm taking that initiative now. And it doesn't always come off polished. Sometimes it's still really rough around the edges. And I'm thankful for, I have a sister that has gone through a lot of different struggles. And she's flat out told me, the way you're coming across is not very nice right now, or whatever it is. And so, but I can engage in those conversations. And because I have that sister that's willing to engage and tell me the truth, we might need some time apart for a moment, but then we can come back and it's really deepened those relationships. So those that are willing to engage in those hard conversations, those relationships are so much richer. So I'm really grateful for that. I really see the restorative aspect of that. And then seeing that play out in my son's relationship with his new wife, and also seeing, unfortunately, because of the destruction of the 28-year marriage, I'm seeing the residual effect of that on one of my other sons. And so being willing to engage in those conversations with the other two kids that are not involved with anybody in particular right now. And also, you know, hearing from different friends as I'm processing different things. I think this is kind of on a tangent, but one of the things that really stuck out to me is during the last, my father flatlined, but also during the last 2.5 years. So shortly after he flatlined, I've been going through a divorce, and it was a 2.5 year process, really grueling. And one of the things that my father said to me about a month or maybe 2 months before he passed was, well, this divorce is taking too long. And so without him knowing really what the situation was, I mean, I was receiving a text of, you know, I thought I taught you better. And just all the divorce, of course, is all my fault. I know that's not true. And I'm thankful for the relationships with other people around me that know what the truth is to help keep me grounded in that. But the reason why I bring that up is because I'm seeing those destructive patterns. And I'm also learning to I've got a toolbox that keeps growing of tools of, okay, now I can identify manipulation much faster. Now I can identify the gaslighting much faster. Now I can identify a lot of the unhealthy patterns. So it causes problems sometimes because I'm not able to, I'm faster now at articulating it. A lot of the brain fog is lifting, but sometimes I can pick it up much faster than even people around me. So when I'm at work and I can pick up when they're really difficult people that have very entitled attitudes, when I can pick that up before other people can, it's hard. That part's hard because I'm not able to articulate it or necessarily have the pattern of behavior yet to be able to identify it. But that intent is definitely up.
And that's huge to be able to notice unhealthy people around you. And it's not our job to fix them or fix them, but it's nice to be able to notice it.
Yes. Well, and it's nice to be able to be at a place to be able to discern of, ooh, this is, you know, something's not right here. And when I can discern what it is, even if other people don't agree with it, I'm still checking myself and looking to see, okay, is there a pattern going on? But I'm a lot more confident in my discretion, and I'm able to assert the boundaries that I need to protect myself better now.
Okay, so thank you all so much for being with me. And let's tie this up. So if nobody watched anything that we did here after you were all so brave and so honest, and you could just have 1 minute of wisdom, if when you're talking to someone who's having what we experience, like a parent has died and they say, I just feel guilty because I really don't miss them and I really don't care. Or I still hate the guy who poisoned the whole family and I'm still cleaning up behind him, or things like that. Not to say, well, good for you, be as obnoxious as you can, but rather inviting them to just making peace with what's really true about their experience of their parent and their experience of the grief. My friend and I would stand at the Mother's Day card rack for 15 minutes making jokes because we just could not get ourselves to pick a card. If I did a mushy card, it would be repulsive because it was so insincere. And if I did a funny card, that was annoying because it wasn't funny. It wasn't funny the way she treated us. It wasn't funny the way my dad treated us. But that the two of us could giggle our way through. We don't got that huggy feely family thing going on, do we? And so what would you want people to know? So Donna, how about if you start? What would be your 1 minute of wisdom that affirms people that had these parents and not those parents? And just let it be okay that your version of grief is your version of grief.
Well, I like that the two other ladies have takeaways from the problems that they had with the parents. Melinda learning how to draw boundaries and not allowing that kind of treatment from future people. Just because the person's dead, we don't need to be running around frightened that filling a pattern that we're used to, I guess, is what we can tend to do. And it took me a long time and help, from you and previous therapists, just to nail down the things that I can do to prevent it from occurring again, or preventing it from happening to anybody in my family. And a lot of it has been trying to get my mother to understand, and just not dwelling. For her, she's so old now, just not dwelling on the past. She refuses to dwell on the past and let that negativity enter into her final years, which I think is a huge step for her. So, and, in this part of my life, I don't, like I said, I don't put up with any kind of bullshit from people that they just want to dump in my lap, or their manipulations, the gaslighting. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And identifying it is just almost a game now, when you're being manipulated, and to be able to stop it and to develop that. It's a skill. And to develop that over time is so rewarding. So, especially when it works.
That's great. So taking the bad, but turning it into growth and change and strength. In the end, learning how to tell the truth about them lets you tell the truth about everything else.
Took a lifetime.
Yeah. Amity, what is your wisdom for us?
Probably to give yourself more grace in dealing with any kind of pain or heartache or disappointment, because we're allowed to feel that way and it's all valid. Even if we are think that we should be past it by now, or that we should have worked through this part, or they're dead, why am I still mad? Why do I still have this anger? Well, I know that comes from hurt, but just to give yourself a little bit of grace, and it'd be okay to have shitty days. Tomorrow might not be that shitty. But for me, I had to stay in bed yesterday, and that's okay. And today wasn't as bad.
Oh, that's so true. Just letting yourself, I am what I am because of my past, but the future can change. I can change. I can learn and grow, and just at whatever pace that is.
And if I have to blow up sometimes, I know why I'm like that. It may not be right, but it's part of me still.
Yeah, so the grace for the growth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Melinda, what is your 1 minute wisdom for people to carry out of here?
Well, I gotta say, I can relate to the whole standing in front of the cards thing. They need a larger variety of greeting cards for Mother's Day and Father's Day, I will say that. But I think the analogy of driving probably hits me the most, and that is, if we're moving forward, we need to be looking out the windshield much more than we're looking out the rear view mirror. It's important to look through the rear view mirror to see how far we've come, to learn, to be honest. I mean, that's really what life was like, but not to stay back in the mud of that, but to look forward and what can I learn from that? And I definitely agree with Amity, giving yourself grace. I mean, there are days when I'll feel really good about something, and then something will happen and I'll catch myself slipping back into old patterns and I'll get really frustrated. And I had a really good therapist that reminded me and just said, you know what, but look at how far you've come. Like, the dips are not as low as they were anymore. And so just keep working on the tools, use the tools that I have, and growing healthy relationships. Discernment, but growing healthy relationships and investing in those and letting go of the baggage. There's a really great skit by the Skit Guys, and it shows, just the theme of it was, just because someone drops the baggage on you doesn't mean you have to pick it up. And so, yeah, the driving analogy with the windshield, the front windshield with a small rearview mirror, and not picking up the baggage just because somebody throws it on you. Those are huge for me. And definitely a lot of grace for oneself.
Okay, thank you again so much for having this hard conversation. I so appreciate you all. And just keep working and growing and changing, being that
Thank you.
transitional generation. And I will see you all later.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.